I'm joined with Dan Wilton from First Mining. Dan, thanks for joining us.
Oh, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So gold is on a tear here. It felt like that was the case last year too. We were kind of pushing those highs 2 years ago, not so much. Now you've been running a gold company for a while now. You guys got
Yep.
some serious assets. I'm sure you have thoughts on what's driving the price and where we might be heading.
Yeah.
Can you share those with us?
I mean, listen, the gold price, I think, is doing its part for investors, and particularly investors in company like ours. Really being driven by, I think, geopolitical instability, being driven by what I think is an almost irreversible position on government debt. And that's where I think the gold price is really just kind of foretelling what's coming down the pipe in the government, sort of from in government finance. Like at some point, $4 trillion annual deficits in the U.S. is just unsustainable. And so, that combined with the geopolitics, I think you're seeing sort of that loss of the U.S. dollar as its safe haven status or its kind of global currency of choice status is just putting central banks primarily in a path to want to own another asset. And most of them, particularly China, have taken the view that that other asset is gold.
Yeah, it's funny you mention the government just basically out of control spending, and
Yeah.
we see it in Canada right now where
Yeah.
Mark Carney just announced $5 billion for tariff impacted businesses, which I don't really understand because I don't really like where are they going to find a customer like the U.S.? It's just basically uh, corporate welfare, as far as I can tell. And I feel like people in our world, we have these conversations and we see what's going on. There's a reason that we have basically devoted our livelihoods to precious metals.
Yeah.
And then we go out and we have those conversations with, you know, your cousins or your neighbors or your barber or whoever, and they don't always see it the same way we do. Um, I'm I'm curious here for you to be running a precious metals company. Do you think that we're going to be going back to some sort of a gold standard here, or where gold could be potentially re-rated above $10,000 in the next 5 years?
If you'd have asked me that 5 years ago, I'd have said not likely.
Yeah.
You ask me that today, I say uh, de facto when you've had, a lot of so much of global foreign reserves move into gold, where the point where, a lot of foreign governments are now holding more gold than US dollars. Yeah, I think it's one of the few things that can really help address that underpinning of trust that a currency needs to be a global currency. And for the US, everyone's seen those calculations that have been done. They could back the debt entirely if the gold price was $15,000 an ounce. Does it trend there? I don't know. I don't know if it necessarily is that explicit, but I think the importance of gold as that global, currency of exchange is really kind of coming to the fore here.
Now, I feel like for you guys, it must be playing into your thesis here because you've got some very substantial projects here that you probably could have been banging your head against the wall trying to get into production a lot sooner, but it's a heck of a lot easier to do that when gold's trading, say, $4,000 than it is when gold's trading at $2,200. So let's talk about First Mining. There's going
Yeah.
to be people that are going through our Beaver Creek playlist and they're unfamiliar with the company. Why don't you walk them through the story in a quick little 2-minute overview?
Yeah. So First Mining is advancing two of the biggest undeveloped gold projects in Canada. So our Spring Pole project, which would be 5 million ounce gold project in northwestern Ontario, kind of near Red Lake, Ontario, in advanced stages in the environmental assessment process. We've been in the EA process since 2018 and really targeting that EA decision in the first half of next year. It's a big, robust project, large 1 gram gold and 5 gram silver open pit. So yeah, the economics of that when we ran our pre-feasibility study wasn't that long ago. It was 2021, but we ran that at $1,600 gold. You start looking at what the economics of these projects look like when, the gold price has more than doubled. The capex of the project and the operating costs have not more than doubled in that time frame. So I think you're going to see some real leverage to the gold price, which is the thing that these big projects give investors. For us, every $100 in the gold price above those study levels is 250 million US of after-tax NPV.
So I see this is what I have on my notes here. The MPV that we have recorded here was just under $1 billion. Was that the one that was done
Yeah, that was 2021.
2021?
Yeah.
Now, are you guys thinking about doing maybe an economic update on on the feasibility study to
Yeah.
give us a sense of what that looks like under more relevant prices?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've kept on top of what we think has changed in capital and operating costs, really kind of at an internal scoping level, but really since then, because we've changed the scope of the project quite a bit, which we think has actually made it more capital efficient, not less. And so that's very positive, but we're driving towards a feasibility study in 2026. So our plan really is over this winter, we'll do kind of the last of the data collection we need for the feasibility study, which is not that big a program. Most of that feasibility study work has been done between 2021 and 2024. So we're about 90% of the way through the technical work around the fees. So that would be something that, we're targeting that EA approval in the first half of 2026, feasibility study in the back half of 2026.
So, you guys have done some exploration in 2025. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so that's really at our Duparquet gold project, really focused there. Duparquet is a project that's in Quebec, right smack in the middle of the Abitibi. It's about 50 kilometers from Rouyn-Noranda. If you drive from Rouyn-Noranda to Timmins, which are two of the major mining cities in Canada, you literally drive over top of the deposit. That's 3.5 million ounces of M&I, 2.5 million ounces of inferred. So one of the biggest undeveloped gold projects in the Abitibi. And we put out a study on that in 2023 that showed a mine that can produce more than 200,000 ounces a year over an 11-year mine life.
And that's a $588 million MPV5.
That's the one, but that's at $1,800 gold.
Okay.
So, again,
It's gonna try.
you look at that at $2,200 gold, it's like 1 point something billion. You look at that at $2,500 gold, it's about 100 million US of after-tax NPV for every $100 of the Equifax. So lots of room for that to move as well. And it's what you want in an investment in this market is that leverage to the increasing gold price. And the development companies, when you can buy our ounces today at $15 an ounce, it was sub $10 an ounce for a long time, and a lot of our investors are invested in that sub $10 an ounce. But, you get that leverage to the gold price with advanced stage assets with really well understood geology. They're well drilled out.
So, Dan, I'm looking at this. I'm going, okay, based on the MPVs that you have,
Yeah.
if we update that based, back of the napkin based on the numbers you just gave me,
Yeah.
you guys have on paper assets that are probably worth north of $3 billion in terms of NPV.
I think well north of
Yeah,
$3 billion.
I'm being
Yeah.
conservative,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's using $3,600 gold. Your market cap, I think, at the time of us recording, somewhere below 300 million Canadian.
Correct.
What if I'm sitting at home, I go, okay, this is really interesting. What's the risk here? What am I worried about if I decide to hop in and buy some shares?
Yeah, I think with Springpole, it's always been around that environmental assessment process. The deposit sits in the bay of a lake. And so the development plan, you have to build dikes, dewater that bay of the lake. Now, we've been studying that for 10 years. If anyone's interested, you can read 15,000 pages of environmental assessment document that's on our website. So we've done the work to demonstrate that this can be done, safely over the long term. And I think that's something that, the communities that we're working with have real questions about that. And they need to go through their process. We've all hired great technical advisors to really help understand what this project is. So, it is really at Springpole about that environmental assessment approval and around, getting the kind of, call it the social approval from the Indigenous communities in the area. And we're, working hard at both of those things. And I think, major, major catalysts coming
Yeah.
between now and let's call it the middle of next year.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Let's wrap it up with this. If I'm sitting around watching this, I go, okay, this is interesting. I want to have a checklist of what I expect out of the company over, say, the next 12 months.
Yeah.
What am I thinking about? What should I be watching out for?
So at Springpole, it really is milestones in that EA process. So lots of things that will be coming, probably more towards call it Q1, Q2 next year. Um, But there's lots of little milestones along the way in that EA process. So investors can watch for that as we go through the EA process federally and provincially. At Duparquet, lots of great exploration results. So, we've drilled, I think, 16,000 meters of an 18,000 meter program. We've probably only released the first, 5,000 meters of that. So lots more drill results coming out at Duparquet, demonstrating that big resource that we have in the middle of the Abitibi is actually only getting bigger. We're demonstrating better continuity. And then ultimately, I think moving Duparquet towards a pre-feasibility study update, in 2026 as well.
All right. Well, Dan, thanks so much for hopping on here. I always find this story super interesting whenever we get to chat. It's also kind of nice when you're an investor and you know that there's a couple of potential catalysts that can just unlock a massive re-rate. So,
Yeah, I think, the big thing to understand is if you look at those largest projects in Canada, there's a slide in our deck that talks about this, but there's very few of those that you're going to be able to put the shovel in the ground before 2030. Just because we've been through an EA process and, government of Canada is working to streamline processes. I understand that. But we understand the amount of work you need to do in a modern context to go through that EA process. So, do the homework on the ones that are the most advanced, right? I think those really do have an advantage in terms of where is that real springboard to where you're going to, have the share price run up on major de-risking.
all right. Well, Dan, thanks so much for hopping on here. And I look forward to chatting with you. Who knows, maybe this time next year. And
Hopefully before that.
well, certainly if you guys unlock those catalysts, we're going to be begging you to come on. So
Yeah,
thanks.
don't need to beg, just ask. We're all good.
Awesome.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks very much.